We constantly hear about the biological clock, as if it's this alarm that only ever goes off for women.
Right, because menopause has this very clear, undeniable stopping point. It's a biological red light.
Exactly. And because of that, I think society tends to just assume the male machinery just, well, runs perfectly forever.
Yeah, that's a huge misconception.
It really is. Because looking at the clinical data today, the medical research, the endocrinology, reports that assumption is just dead wrong. I mean, the male biological clock absolutely ticks.
It does. It's just a much quieter clock. We aren't looking at a sudden, dramatic shutdown.
Right, it's more subtle.
Yeah, it's this gradual, insidious decline in cellular function. And honestly, it often goes completely unnoticed until it manifests as like a severe drop in fertility or energy or just overall health.
And uncovering the reality of that decline, and more importantly, how to actually reverse it, is the mission of our deep dive today.
Which is such an important topic.
Definitely. So we are sorting through this massive stack of research on what is clinically defined as testicular aging, but, we aren't here to just admire the problem.
No, nobody wants to just hear bad news.
Exactly. We want to briefly understand the underlying mechanism, like why male fertility and testosterone drop with age, and then we're going to dedicate the bulk of our time to the incredibly advanced, scientifically backed remedies.
It's the solutions.
Right. We're focusing heavily on the medical, supplemental, and lifestyle interventions that can genuinely repair the machinery.
Because the scientific community has moved far beyond simply telling men to just, accept age-related decline.
Right, like you're just getting older, deal with it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We now possess this highly specific, targeted arsenal of biological interventions. They're designed to clear out the damage and optimize the reproductive system at a real molecular level.
Okay, let's unpack this. To understand how these remedies actually work, I want to introduce a framework from the sources.
I love this analogy.
Yeah, it's great. So think of the testicle as a high-precision, 24/7 manufacturing facility. You have an organ that never sleeps, right? It's tasked with continuously producing millions of complex sperm cells and just pumping out testosterone.
Right. It's a massive, energetic undertaking.
And as you age, the facility doesn't just, board up its windows and close. Instead, the internal power grids start to fail. And this kind of biological rust begins eating away at the assembly lines.
That rust is the key to everything.
Yeah. But before we look at the anti-rust treatments, we really need to know what that rust actually is.
Well, you have to look directly at the power grid of the cells, the mitochondria.
That's the energy factories.
Exactly. They generate the energy required for this massive manufacturing effort. But as men age, the mitochondria start to lose their structural integrity.
They get weak.
Yeah. And when that happens, the electron transport chain inside them gets inefficient. So they begin leaking these highly reactive, volatile molecules known as reactive oxygen species, or ROS.
And, a small amount of ROS is a normal byproduct of making energy, right? Your body usually just sweeps them up.
Completely normal, yeah.
But I'm reading here that when the aging mitochondria accelerate this leaking, it triggers what they call oxidative stress.
That's the clinical term for the rust, yeah.
So taking this beyond the metaphor of rust for a second, what is oxidative stress physically doing to the tissue?
It is causing catastrophic structural damage on, well, basically two fronts.
Okay, what's the first?
First, it targets the DNA inside the sperm. These reactive molecules essentially steal electrons from the DNA strands.
Wow, so they're literally breaking it.
Physically fragmenting and breaking them apart, yes. And second, this oxidative stress attacks the Leydig cells.
And those are the testosterone cells, right?
Exactly. Those are the specialized cells in the testes responsible for synthesizing testosterone. So when the Leydig cells get damaged, testosterone production just plummets.
Which explains why testicular aging isn't just a fertility issue, It's a systemic hormone issue. It affects a man's mood, muscle density, drive, everything.
It impacts the whole body.
Right. So oxidative stress is the enemy. It's the biological rust. And that brings us to the first line of defense in our clinical stack, targeted antioxidants.
And this is where it gets really fascinating.
Yeah, because what stands out immediately is that we aren't just throwing like a generic gummy multivitamin at the problem.
Far from it. Modern enderology uses real precision medicine. We deploy specific antioxidants to protect very specific geographical locations within that cellular factory.
Let's look at vitamin E. The research refers to it as the lipid shield.
A very apt name.
I found the biological mechanism here so interesting because sperm cells are built for travel, right? They have this highly fluid, flexible outer membrane made of polyunsaturated fatty acids.
Which makes them great swimmers, but there's a downside.
Right. Those fats are incredibly vulnerable to oxidation. It's similar to how cooking oil goes rancid if you leave it out in the sun.
You've hit on the exact vulnerability there. That process is called lipid peroxidation.
Lipid peroxidation. Okay.
Yeah, and a single free radical can trigger this chain reaction that just tears through the entire sperm membrane. It basically renders the cell immobile.
So it can't swim.
Exactly. But because vitamin E is an alpha tocopherol, meaning it's fat soluble, it seamlessly embeds itself directly into that fatty outer wall of the sperm.
Oh, wow. So it's right there on the front lines.
It acts as a literal biochemical shield. It intercepts the free radicals and breaks the chain reaction before it can breach the cell.
And the clinical data really backs up that localized defense. Like, double-blind trials show that vitamin E therapy significantly boosts sperm motility in infertile men.
Because it protects the engines.
Right, so they can actually swim. Now, if vitamin E is guarding the lipid wall, I noticed the clinical guidelines also heavily feature vitamin C.
They do, yeah.
And, I mean, they seem redundant at first glance. If you have E, why do you need C? Don't they do the same thing?
No, it comes down to that solubility difference, which changes everything.
How so?
Vitamin C is ascorbic acid, which is water-soluble, so it physically cannot embed in that fatty membrane.
Right, oil and water don't mix.
Exactly. Instead, vitamin C patrols the aqueous environment, the seminal plasma that surrounds all the cells.
Okay, so it's acting as, like, the water purifier for the fluids on the factory floor, while vitamin E is bolted onto the machinery itself.
That's a perfect way to look at it. They work in tandem, but in completely different jurisdictions, you know?
That makes total sense.
And by neutralizing the oxidative threats in the seminal fluid, vitamin C significantly improves sperm count and morphology.
Morphology meaning the physical shape of the cells.
Right. And more importantly, high levels of vitamin C in older men correlate with a sharp decrease in that DNA fragmentation we mentioned earlier.
Okay, so we've covered the perimeter and the fluids, but here's where it gets really interesting. The sources highlight something operating deep inside the cell itself.
Glutathione.
Glutathione. It's labeled here as the master antioxidant.
Yeah.
Mainly because your body synthesizes it internally, right?
Right, your body makes it.
But its specific job is preventing a process called ferroptosis. And this is where the biology gets intense.
It really does. Ferroptosis translates to iron-dependent cell death. And it's exactly as destructive as it sounds.
Iron-dependent. How does iron get in there?
Well, when oxidative stress runs rampant inside the testicular tissue, it can disrupt your normal iron metabolism. So toxic levels of free iron begin to build up.
Oh, and iron rusts.
Literally. That iron acts as a catalyst. It supercharges the oxidation process until the cell membranes just completely collapse.
That sounds catastrophic.
It is. But glutathione is the critical ammunition used by specialized enzymes to reduce those toxic buildups back into harmless compounds. It effectively halts ferroptosis in its tracks.
So glutathione basically rescues the internal tissue from a complete metabolic meltdown.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've effectively shielded the cells with vitamin E, cleaned the fluids with vitamin C, and stopped the iron toxicity with glutathione.
We've handled the rust.
Right. But if we stick to the manufacturing framework, protecting the engines doesn't matter if they don't have fuel to run.
That's the next big hurdle.
Yeah, that's where the clinical data shifts from protection to active energy optimization. And they start with L-Carnitine.
L-Carnitine is an absolute staple in fertility clinics, and its role is purely logistical.
Logistical, like moving things around.
Exactly. The mitochondria burn fatty acids for pure energy, but the inner membrane of a mitochondrion is practically impenetrable to long-chain fatty acids.
So the fuel is locked out.
Right. They cannot get inside on their own.
I was reading about this. So L-Carnitine isn't actually the fuel itself, is it?
No, not at all.
It's the molecular transport shuttle.
It is the biological forklift. It binds to the fatty acids, escorts them through that impermeable mitochondrial wall, and just drops them off to be burned.
Wow. So without sufficient L-Carnitine, the fuel just piles up outside.
The engines starve and sperm motility crashes, but supplementing L-Carnitine restarts that transport chain.
And there's data on this, right?
Oh, yeah. A major 3-month clinical trial demonstrated that it not only improved concentration and movement, but it translated directly to higher pregnancy and live birth rates.
That's incredible. Now, this next remedy completely challenged my assumptions. Melatonin.
Everyone's surprised by this one.
Right. Universally, we know melatonin is the sleep hormone. Like you take it for jet lag. Seeing it listed as a targeted remedy for testicular aging felt really out of place. What does sleep have to do with the machinery?
In the macroscopic world, yes, it's for sleep. But in the microscopic world of cellular energy, melatonin has this potent second identity.
Which is?
It is a highly specialized mitochondrial protector. It actually concentrates inside the mitochondria at levels vastly higher than what you find in your bloodstream.
Wait, really? And it does this by interacting with specific enzymes, right? The notes mention something called SOD2.
Superoxide dismutase 2.
Okay, what does that do?
Think of SOD2 as the mitochondria's built-in fire extinguisher. It takes highly toxic superoxide radicals and converts them into less dangerous molecules.
And melatonin helps with that.
Melatonin directly upregulates the production of SOD2. There was a remarkable study where researchers treated sperm samples from 52 men directly with melatonin.
And what happened?
It vastly improved rapid progressive motility, meaning the sperm swam fast and in a straight line, and it drastically reduced the number of dead or immobile cells.
From a sleep aid to a localized mitochondrial fire extinguisher. That is a wild pivot.
There really is.
Okay, so moving past the structural protection, let's look at the cellular operating system. The research highlights curcumin.
Right, the active medical compound derived from turmeric.
Yeah, it's not just a spice. It's cited here for activating two specific cellular pathways, AMPK and SRT3.
This is where we're optimizing the internal software of the cell. AMPK functions as the master energy sensor within the body.
So it monitors power levels.
Exactly. When activated, it tells the cell to generate more energy efficiently. And SRT3 is an enzyme that regulates the proteins inside the mitochondria.
So curcumin is basically fine-tuning the whole system.
By activating these specific pathways, highly bioavailable curcumin optimizes the entire energy grid. It ensures the mitochondria produce maximum power with minimal free radical exhaust.
Which sets us up perfectly for NMN, which is a compound getting a lot of attention in the broader anti-aging space.
NMN is huge right now.
Yeah, and I was analyzing the clinical data on NMN in these sources. It's fascinating because NMN doesn't actually repair DNA directly, does it? It's just a precursor molecule.
That's a crucial distinction. We know that aging and oxidative stress break the strands of sperm DNA, right?
The fragmentation.
Well, your body possesses specialized repair enzymes, specifically one called PRP1, whose sole function is to detect those breaks and physically stitch the DNA back together.
But PRP1 can't operate in a vacuum. I assume it needs tools.
It requires a massive amount of a coenzyme called NAD+ to fuel that repair process. And as men age, their natural NAD+ levels plummet.
So the repair crew is there, but they have no supplies.
And the PRP1 enzyme is present, but it has no fuel to do the welding. NMN is the direct chemical precursor to NAD+. Ah, I see.
When a patient takes NMN, they are flooding the cellular factory with NAD plus fuse. They're handing the PRP1 enzyme the exact chemical fuel it needs to aggressively stitch broken genetic material back together.
That is amazing. So we've covered an incredibly robust biological toolkit here.
We really have.
Vitamin C and E for localized shielding, glutathione to stop iron toxicity, L-Carnitine for fuel transport, melatonin and curcumin for energy optimization, and NMN to fuel DNA repair.
It's a comprehensive stack.
But the research also addresses men experiencing severe clinical decline, where these over-the-counter interventions just aren't enough.
Right. That brings us to the heavy medical artillery. When the factory's production of testosterone and sperm plummets to near zero, endocrinologists turn to dual hormone therapy.
Specifically utilizing FSH and LH, right? Follicle-stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone.
Exactly.
These are part of the communication loop between the brain and the testes, aren't they? Yes, the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis. The brain sends LH and FSH down to the testes as chemical signals commanding them to produce testosterone and sperm.
And aging disrupts that signal.
In severe cases of aging, the brain's pulse signals get incredibly weak, or the testicular tissue just becomes deaf to the signal.
So how does the therapy fix it?
By administering highly calibrated doses of FSH and LH, doctors unofficially amplify that command signal. They directly force the Leydig cells to ramp up testosterone synthesis, which rescues the testicular microenvironment.
Okay, now if you're tracking with us, you might be thinking, great, what's the magic dosage? I'm going to go online right now, buy this entire stack of highly potent antioxidants, take them every day, and maximize my cellular production.
Please don't do that.
Right, because the clinical notes flag a massive biological risk here. Taking uncalibrated massive doses of antioxidants can actually backfire and cause the exact infertility you're trying to cure.
It is one of the most dangerous misconceptions in supplementation. Biological systems operate on a razor-thin balance.
So more isn't always better.
Definitely not. If you flood your system with massive doses of antioxidants, you can push the environment too far in the opposite direction, creating a state called reductive stress.
Wait, reductive stress?
Yeah.
How does clearing out all the free radicals become a bad thing?
Because your body actually requires a low controlled level of free radicals for vital physiological functions.
Like what?
For example, for a sperm cell to successfully penetrate an egg, it has to undergo a final maturation process called capacitation.
Okay.
That process is literally triggered by small amounts of ROS. If you blindly eradicate all free radicals with huge handfuls of pills, you halt normal cellular signaling. You essentially paralyze the system.
Oh, wow. So personalized dosing isn't just a medical recommendation, it's a biological necessity.
Absolutely.
You need an endocrinologist or urologist to look at a baseline semen analysis and a hormonal blood panel, just to calibrate the exact amount of oxidative stress that actually needs clearing.
Precision is everything here. You cannot manage an endocrine system through guesswork.
Good to know. But since you need a doctor to fine-tune the heavy medical stacks, the research explicitly outlines foundational lifestyle prescriptions, things you can do right now that dictate how well this system runs daily.
And the foundations are surprisingly straightforward. Diet, sleep, and exercise.
Right. Your plate is your first pharmacy. A diet rich in zinc, selenium, and omega-3 fatty acids provides the raw baseline materials the cells need to maintain structural integrity.
And sleep plays right into the endocrine rhythm. Poor sleep destroys things.
Yeah, chronic sleep deprivation doesn't just make you tired. It spikes systemic inflammation and actively suppresses the nighttime surges of testosterone your body relies on for repair.
Sleep is non-negotiable.
But the literature on exercise is where things get really counterintuitive. So what does this all mean for the gym goers? I mean, I always assumed that if moderate exercise boosts testosterone, then heavy, exhaustive exercise like ultramarathons or max weightlifting every day must push it even higher.
That makes logical sense, but you're running into the biological principle of hormesis.
Hormesis, what is that?
Hormesis means that a mild stressor makes an organism stronger, but a severe stressor destroys it.
Oh, I see.
Moderate, consistent physical activity is fantastic. It trains your mitochondria to be more efficient, and it lowers baseline inflammation.
But extreme exercise flips the equation.
Violently intense or exhaustive exercise demands so much energy so quickly that the mitochondria go into overdrive.
And they leak.
They leak a massive tsunami of free radicals. It completely overwhelms the cellular defenses.
Oh, man.
That extreme oxidative stress damages the sperm DNA and actively blunts testosterone production. For long-term hormonal health, moderation isn't just a suggestion, it is the required protocol.
That is a stark reality check for the whole no days off fitness crowd. Like, you might be looking highly optimized in the mirror while actively rusting out your internal endocrine system.
Exactly, you're rusting from the inside.
Which leads us to the final and frankly most alarming section of our deep dive. We've talked about how to fix the damage, but the clinical data highlights a hidden saboteur.
It is the false friend of the medical world.
Yeah. An over-the-counter compound that men take casually, constantly, assuming it's perfectly safe. Well, it secretly dismantles their hormone production from the inside out.
It's frightening how common it is.
The clinical sources point the finger squarely at high doses of NSAIDs, specifically ibuprofen.
This is a vital warning for anyone listening. A significant portion of the population will have a tough workout, tweak their back, and casually take high doses of ibuprofen for days or weeks on end just to manage the inflammation.
Because it's cheap. It's everywhere.
Right.
And it feels harmless. You can buy it at a gas station.
Right. But ibuprofen doesn't just block pain pathways. It acts as a severe endocrine disruptor.
Seriously.
The research highlights a landmark study conducted on healthy young men in their prime biological window, 18 to 35 years old.
Okay, young guys.
They were given 1,200 milligrams of ibuprofen a day. Now, to put that in perspective, that's roughly 3 or 4 standard over-the-counter pills spread throughout the day.
I mean, that is an incredibly common dosage for someone managing a sprained ankle.
They maintained that dosage for just 6 weeks.
Just 6 weeks.
In that short window, the ibuprofen actively penetrated the testes and directly inhibited the steroidogenic enzymes,
Wait, what enzymes?
the specific biological catalyst required to convert cholesterol into testosterone. It literally blocked the synthesis pathway.
Shut down the assembly line.
It forced the brain's pituitary gland to go into panic mode. It was screaming at the testes with a massive surge of LH just to keep the men's testosterone from flatlining completely.
That is terrifying.
It induced a clinical state known as compensated hypogonadism in healthy young men in a month and a half. Painkillers are highly targeted, systemic drugs. Treating them like candy will actively dismantle your foundational hormone health.
Man, let's pull all these threads together. Testicular aging is a biological reality driven by mitochondrial breakdown and oxidative stress, a cellular rust that shreds DNA and halts hormone production.
That's the baseline truth.
But the arsenal of remedies is sophisticated and proven.
Yeah.
We've seen how vitamin E and C act as targeted shields, how glutathione neutralizes iron toxicity, and how L-Carnitine, melatonin, and curcumin optimize the mitochondrial engines. We've even looked at NMN fueling the DNA repair enzymes.
The science is phenomenal, provided it is deployed with precision.
Right. Because avoiding reductive stress through medical supervision, balancing moderate exercise, and protecting your endocrine system from over-the-counter disruptors, that's the only way to effectively maintain that biological machinery.
It really is.
It really reorients how you view daily health. Eat your targeted antioxidants, prioritize your sleep, respect the limits of exercise, and for the love of God, treat ibuprofen with the caution it clinically deserves.
And, this data raises a deeply compelling question that I want to leave you with.
Let's hear it.
If something as commonplace, heavily marketed, and readily available as ibuprofen can dramatically suppress testosterone synthesis and induce hypogonadism in prime-age men in just 6 weeks, what other everyday habits, diets, or over-the-counter comforts are secretly rewriting our foundational cellular health right under our noses?
That is a phenomenal question, and definitely a reason to audit our own daily routines. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the things you take for granted, keep protecting your cellular health, and most importantly, keep learning. Catch you next time.